Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into one of the foundation theories in international relations, realism. Whether you're studying international politics or just curious about how states interact on the global stage, realism is a crucial theory to understand. Realism is one of the oldest and most influential theories in international relations. It's all about power, survival, and the belief that states act primarily in their own self-interest. Let's break it down. At its heart, realism is based on a few key assumptions. First, anarchy. In the context of international relations, anarchy doesn't mean chaos, but rather the lack of central authority. There's no global government enforcing rules, so states have to look out for themselves. Next, self-interest and survival. Realists believe that, in this anarchic world, states are primarily concerned with their own survival. They'll act in ways that maximize their power and security, even if it leads to conflict with other nations. And of course, the central currency of international relations is power. Whether that's military strength, economic influence, or political leverage, power is the tool states use to pursue their interests. Realists also have a pessimistic view of human nature. Classical realists like Hans Morgenthau argue that humans, and by extension states, are naturally driven by a desire for power. Conflict is seen as inevitable, and peace, when it exists, is just a temporary balance of power. Lastly, the concept of balance of power. States will often form alliances or build up their military to counterbalance the strength of other states, preventing any one country from dominating the global system. One of the most influential classical realists is Hans Morgenthau. In his book, Politics Among Nations, a classic in the field, Morgenthau argues that politics is governed by objective laws rooted in human nature. For Morgenthau, states, like individuals, have an inherent desire for power. But it's not about evil, it's just part of the reality of international politics. Leaders, according to Morgenthau, should act rationally and pragmatically. They need to focus on the national interest and avoid ideological crusades that can lead to unnecessary wars. His perspective reminds us that, while moral ideals are important, realism teaches that statesmen must focus on what keeps their nation secure in an unpredictable world. Now, realism isn't a modern concept. It actually traces back to Thucydides, the ancient Greek historian. In his work, The History of Peloponnesian War, Thucydides showed how power struggles led Athens and Sparta into conflict. One of the most famous passages, the Melian Dialogue, captures the essence of realistic thinking. In this dialogue, the Athenians tell the Melians, "The strong do what they can, and the weak suffer what they must." This blunt statement reflects the realistic idea that power, not morality, drives international politics. The world, according to realism, is not a place of justice, but of survival and dominance. Fast forward to the 20th century, and we get to neorealism, or structural realism, developed by Kenneth Waltz. Now, while classical realism focuses on human nature, Waltz shifts the emphasis to the structure of the international system. In his book, Theory of International Politics, Waltz argued that it's the anarchic structure of the international system that compels states to compete for power, not just their internal motivations. He believed that the distribution of power among states, whether the world is unipolar, bipolar, or multipolar, determines how the states behave. Waltz's polarity concept shows us that in a bipolar world, like during the Cold War between the US and the Soviet Union, things are more stable because there are only two major powers to balance. In contrast, multipolar systems with many competing powers are often more prone to conflict. While realism has been incredibly influential, it's not without its critics. Some argue that realism is too pessimistic and focus too much on conflict and competition. For example, liberal theorists believe that international institutions, diplomacy, and cooperation can reduce the conflict and promote peace. Others, like constructivists, argue that state behavior is not just driven by material power, but also by social norms and shared identities. So, it's not all about power struggles. Values and ideas can shape how states act too. But despite these critics, realism remains a foundation theory in international relations because it offers a pragmatic view of how states actually behave. In a world where geopolitical tensions continue to rise, realism reminds us that power and security will always be at the forefront of global politics. From Thucydides to Morgenthau and Waltz, realism teaches to see international relations as a competitive, often conflictual arena where survival is key. It may not be the most optimistic worldview, but it helps explain the hard realities of global power dynamics. Thanks for watching.